Jesus, what are you doing?
So according to Greek, the family was not Asian, and he was just making autistic sounds and babbling what came to his mind. And everyone simply jumped to assume that he's racist. So Jake Lucky, the guy who initially reported this, deleted his last tweet and posted a new one. And upon checking the slow clip, you can clearly see that the child and the woman is definitely not Asian. Dimitri responded that it was a Greek family speaking Greek. And to assume that they're Asian is very wrong in itself. My family members are Asian, why would I be racist to the people who brought me up? That they're everyone's Greek, the family.
Maybe he was? I have no idea. Here's a follow-up to the Greek clip.
No, 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 no. No. No, no, no. 廣東話未？廣東話嘛？心里面年没看嘛点没？
One thing that I'm like doing recently is something that I tried to think about over the past few years is nobody has like a feeling on accident. There's always a reason why. There's always a reason why people feel certain things. So kind of related to that is I'm taking a look again at like Christianity or other broad ideas or whatever. And something that I used to do is if I felt like we'll say, when I say epistemology or epistemic, I'm talking about the way that you figure out like what is real or true, essentially, right? If things have like a bad epistemic base, like if they figure like, oh, well, this is true because I have faith in God or whatever. Prior to that, I would just write it off. I'd say this is a waste of time. Like there's nothing of value that I can get from you if you're going to start from this foundation. But something that I'm trying to do now instead is like, if there are these other coherent systems or internally coherent systems of thought, then what I'm trying to do is, well, if you think this, well, like, what are you mapping onto in the real world? Because a foolish statement might be that like religion is real, but I think a more foolish statement would be religion is completely false. Like there's no way that everything is incoherent babble. So many people follow it, so many people believe in it. There's obviously something there that's working, right? Something has to be working. So all I'm trying to do now, I guess, is like look at other systems of thought and then say like, well, what is comparable to or how does this map onto like the real world? Like what experiences are these mapping onto? And then once I get like the mapping, then maybe there's something of value that's being said that I wouldn't be able to get from my point of view, right? So an example of this would be something that I was talking about earlier, where when I think about ethics, if I'm thinking, somebody got mad for characterizing this as 3 normative ethical systems. Like the only normative ethical systems I know of are, you've got deontology, which is kind of like talking about like the virtue of like an individual action, like is something good or you're using people or whatever, like as a means to an end. Like you've got deontology, you've got consequentialism, which is looking at like outcomes of things, right? Like, well, what are the actions we need to take just to create the best outcomes? And then you've got virtue ethics. And virtue ethics are always the things that I made fun of because it's like you try to be virtuous. I don't know. Try to aspire to live up to some virtue. Oh, that's the other threat. Nice. That something got mad at. Let me just let's just read real quick that because this just always seemed weirdly incoherent to me. Virtue ethics is currently one of the 3 major approaches in normative ethics. It may initially be identified as the one that emphasizes the virtues or moral character, in contrast to the approach that emphasizes duties or rules, deontology, or that emphasizes the consequences of actions, consequentialism. So those are the other 2 I talked about. Suppose it is obvious that someone in need should be helped. A utilitarian will point to the fact that the consequences of doing so will maximize well-being. A deontologist to the fact that in doing so, the agent will be acting in accordance with a moral rule, such as doing to others as you would be done by, and a virtue ethicist to the fact that helping that person would be charitable or benevolent. That's not to say that only virtue ethicists attend to virtues, any more than it is to say that only consequentialists attend to consequences or only deontologists to rules. Each of the above-mentioned approaches can make room for virtues, blah, 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 blah. Regardless, are you talking about things like how all the shit you can't eat in Leviticus was probably shit that was not safe to eat at the time? Like if we don't believe in God and they say there are rules that came from God, we should be able to find somewhere in the world these rules actually kind of, yeah, something maybe. I'm not really looking at the theological part as much. I don't care about that right now. I guess what I've been looking at for my own self and then into the world around me for the people I intersect with are like these ideas of like character. Like where does character come from? What does it mean to have good character? So one of the things I completely stole this analogy earlier when I was talking about how to act in a virtuous way or act in accordance with some virtue. I've always felt like, so here's something I've said in the past, and this is kind of like my secular engagement with it, right? When people say the ends justify the means, I don't think that's usually a good statement because oftentimes with those ends, you're sneaking in something that you don't know. So for instance, let's say there's somebody that we can kill, and if we kill them, we'll save like 3 lives, right? Well, do the ends justify the means? Like, yeah, we should kill this person and save these 3 people, right? So that's like the ends justify the means, sure. And you think that what your means is killing a person and your ends are saving 3 people. But there's another statement that gets smuggled in to that end. And the statement is it's okay to kill 1 person to save 3 people. You've now amended like what those ends are. And people don't realize that when you start making compromises like that, you're changing the rules in ways that you don't realize. So that's how I would explain that before. So a different take on this that I thought was interesting is from a Christian perspective. I say Christian. I think C.S. Lewis would count as a Christian author. He's not like a theologian. But from his perspective, the way that he describes it is you have an internal kind of like a character. We'll say like a statue or something. And you can either act in accordance with Christian virtues, or you can act in discord. You can act opposite to those, or with selfishness, greed, whatever sin you choose to practice. And every time you act in a certain direction, every time you act in a certain way, you're chiseling at your character and you're carving and creating something that will resemble whatever action you're taking. So say you were to act in accordance with a certain virtue over and over and over and over and over again. After some time, you're chiseling like a type of character or statue that will be somebody that can act in accordance with that virtue more in the future, somebody that resembles it, has a character that is in accordance with the way that you want to be. Does that make sense? Whereas if you are acting in discord, I don't know if discordance is a word, but if you're acting opposite to that, if you're embodying some sin or whatever, you're chiseling like a different type of statue, is basically what I'm saying. So that's like, I don't believe in internal statues, or I don't believe in that character exists in some spiritual realm or whatever. But like that analogy, I think kind of works in terms of how I would want people to function, because when you act in certain ways, it's not just an action that you do in the external world. It has an internal carving on your character, the capital C, like who you are. It affects you. It leaves a mark on you. Every action that you do towards another person. Yeah. I don't know if I find it hard to listen to people talk about character or building character, and it's something that I've been more interested again, but I don't know. The problem that I've always run into is that most people talk about character bundle in a lot of personal bias and preference into what they talk about, like hating people who do drugs or have sex long ago. Maybe, yeah, I know, but that's like, this is always the problem. Is like people will scare you away from the ideologies, right? You have to get past the people, and you have to look to the teachings or the system of whatever it is you want to analyze, right? I think that this is a huge problem in life. Like Christianity's worst enemy are Christians and the way that they act, right? Because it's easy to look at the actions of a lot of Christians, especially in the United States, and say, wow, what a dog shit religion, right? But I mean, like, you run into that same problem with so many other things too. Look at like progressives, you know, like who are progressives' worst enemies sometimes? It's other progressives, right? Or even conservatives under Trump. Like some conservatives were their own worst enemies as well. People tend to judge the tenets by those that claim that they adhere to them, even if they don't. And yeah, I don't know. It's a problem. What about how we think we are the universe? People like Glink sound like it. Glink is insane. It's not. Yeah. Why Christian virtues versus any religious virtues? I don't know. Maybe I'll read other things. Right now, the only shit being recommended is Christian shit. Maybe I'll read something different in the future. Christianity is easy for me to understand because I have a huge background in Catholicism. So it's not like I'm learning a whole bunch of new shit for the first time. I'm just kind of like recontextualizing it now as an adult when I learned about it as a child. If Destiny converts to Islam, I'd be so excited. This is like a feeling I have, and it's by knowing a lot about Christianity and very little about Islam and not as much about Judaism. But it feels to me like if you are a spiritual tenet of any of the three major monotheistic religions, you're probably living a pretty similar life. That's what it feels like. If you adhere spiritually to like the main pillars of Islam, the main teachings in the Torah, or you know whatever it says in the gospel, like it seems like if you're like your lives should look pretty similar in the more important ways, I would imagine. That's what it feels like, but. Last year I turned to Buddhism. Previously, I had never cared about tradition, but when I now look at stuff like offerings to the Buddha as a means of tying a physical act with the cultivation of generosity, it makes a lot more sense. I'm feeling more and more. I feel this. It took me a long time to learn this. There might be like a deeper chemical or neurophysical or neurophysiological connection to events or something. Like, I'm sure there's a way to explain this scientifically, but I think that it's a mistake to make everything immediately available to a human. I think that tying certain actions or rituals to certain events, I think, is an immensely positive and like spiritually enriching experience. I wish I had a better word for spiritually, but there are aspects to it that are like, I think, indescribable to things. Explain? Yeah, like there's some people will fight on this. I wonder if it's an age thing. I'd have to check. Some people will fight on this. I'm assuming it's like younger people. And I think other people will not fight on this. So a really good example is watching movies. There is something so convenient and nice about being able to download a movie, watch it on my monitor, maybe even play a game on another monitor while I'm watching a movie. What a convenient and nice and fun experience, you know? But there's something magical about, I don't know why or how to explain it, but there's the moment when the lights turn off, the intro is done, and you hear like some people drinking, eating their popcorn, like right before the movie starts, and the whole theater is silent before the opening of any film. And there are moments like these that you have to kind of work for. You have to drive somewhere, you've got to buy shit, you got to find a seat, you have to go through these types of things. But like that ritual is like it's a special feeling that is lost when things become too convenient. Another thing that I compare this to, if you think that take is cringe because you don't like going to movies or whatever, one thing that almost everybody will agree with is something is like lost when you buy a game on Steam. There's something that was so magical and special about driving to the store, going to the case, sometimes having to ask somebody to unlock it so that you can take out the box that has the pictures on the back. You ring it up, you buy it, it's in the bag, you have to wait till you get in the car to open it. You open the box, before you even take out the game, you've got the book that you're looking through. Maybe you're reading it by the passing street lights. The car is going down the street. You get home, like you put in the cartridge, you sit in front of it. Like there's that whole experience. Before you ever even play the game, there is something that's like indescribably awesome about the experience of getting there, the ritual, I guess. Kellen of Kells is now a tier 4 sub. Nice. And they said, have you watched Kingdom of Heaven by Spielberg? The director's cut is pretty good and goes into some of this. I have not seen it. Isn't that just nostalgia? No, I don't think it's nostalgia. I think there's like, I don't know what it is, but there's something to be said for, I think, these types of like ritualistic experiences. And when we shortcut so many things through life, I think that we start to become like these dopamine machines that are missing out on like some other type of like life enrichment. I think is really bad. But Destiny, you're just describing being young. Absolutely not. That's not true, because there still are some physical tactile experiences like that I get. Unboxing a new cell phone is like a fun experience. When you got like a new tech piece or whatever, that's a super fun experience. Although not as fun as the game stuff, because they had like books and like everything was right. It's like, it's a fun thing to do. Going to theaters is still for me a really fun experience. I really enjoy that ritual, whatever. But how do you think people can prevent giving into gratification? It's just so addicting. I don't know. That's a whole other type of thing. Like, I think you need to, I think society, I don't think humans can make those choices. I think society needs to kind of be built around it. We need to be more conscientious of it when we're constructing certain types of societies. Because if you give people like infinite access to like the pleasure buttons, like they're just going to push them until they die. What are you getting to, though? Do you want a religious atheist church, or do you want people to become Christian? I didn't get to any of that. I'm just sharing random fucking thoughts. It's a fucking YouTube stream, dude. I'm not trying to start a church over here. Isn't Destiny describing a dopamine rush just in another form? I don't know how to explain it, but there's something different about, like, people are saying delayed gratification, but it's not delayed gratification. Delayed gratification implies the same gratification just a bit later. There's like more enriching experiences depending on how you engage with stuff. Like, one thing that I'll say, hopefully we've all read at least one book, right? Like, there is a magical special feeling. You could spend 8 hours browsing memes and getting dopamine hits all day long, and you're not going to remember a single one of those memes like the next day. You'll do it for 8 hours and you're done with it. Whereas like there's an experience when you finish reading the final sentence on the final page of a really big fantasy book and you close the book, like that is like that moment in time is a very, very, very special experience you built towards. And it's a different feeling than just like, oh, cool, I just had a delayed dopamine hit, like a delayed gratification, you know? It's a different type of thing.